Okay, shalom, shalom to the elect of the nation of Israel. Once again, it's another video, and it comes to you through the spirit and power of Yahweh Baal Shem Yahushai Baal Shem Rakah Kodash. All praises and glories definitely due. So in this video, I'm going to feature a video that the link was actually put as a comment in the latest video that I did. And I happened to click on the link and watch that video, and it's very informative. It deals with the subject of so-called white man Jesus Christ and where the origin came from for so-called white man Jesus Christ. The image that you see predominantly in the so-called Catholic Church, these different religions, Baptists, Methodists, especially Mount Jake. You have to know the origin of so-called white man Jesus, where it really goes back to. Now, it's common and customary for us to teach it goes back to Caesar Borgia, but it actually stretches further back than that. And here's the proof. The information that you're about to see, it actually goes back to Serapis Chritsus, which was a so-called god that Ptolemy the First invented. Okay? So, without further ado, I'm going to play this video in its entirety. And this video was put up by GMS Upon Precepts, and the subject matter deals with Serapis Chritsus being the origin of so-called white man Jesus. Okay, so without further ado, let's just jump into it.
Hello and welcome to today's video on Ptolemy the First Soter and his creation of the character Serapis, which later became the Egyptian god Serapis Chritsus. Ptolemy was a powerful ruler in ancient Egypt who left a lasting legacy. Today, we will delve into his life and explore how he created a deity that would come to be known as a key inspiration for the biblical Jesus Christ we know today.
Ptolemy the First Soter was born in 367 BC in Macedonia. He was one of Alexander the Great's most trusted generals and played a key role in establishing the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt after Alexander's death. Ptolemy was a shrewd politician and a skilled military strategist, and he ruled Egypt from 305 to 282 BC.
One of Ptolemy's most significant achievements was the creation of Serapis Chritsus, a deity that blended aspects of Greek religion, the god Zeus, and Egyptian religion using Osiris and the Apis bull, called Serapis, which later became Serapis for short. He was depicted as a powerful god with an imposing beard, often holding a staff or a cornucopia. Ptolemy commissioned the construction of a massive temple in Alexandria, next to the Library of Alexandria, called the Serapeum Library, dedicated specifically to Serapis Chritsus, and was one of the largest and most significant religious centers in the ancient world.
Ptolemy intended for Serapis to serve as a unifying force for the diverse peoples of Egypt. He believed that by creating a deity that combined elements of both Greek and Egyptian religion, he could bridge the gap between these two cultures and bring his people together. Serapis was seen as a powerful deity who could bring prosperity, fertility, and protection to his worshippers.
As time went on, Serapis gained popularity not only in Egypt, but also in other parts of the Mediterranean world. His cult spread to Greece and Rome, and eventually, he became a key inspiration for the biblical character Jesus Christ. The similarities between Serapis and Jesus are striking. Both were depicted as powerful saviors who could perform miracles, heal the sick, and bring salvation to their followers. See this video for more similarities between these two.
In conclusion, Ptolemy the First Soter was a remarkable figure in ancient history who left a lasting legacy through his creation of Serapis Chritsus. The deity he created became a unifying force for the diverse peoples of Egypt and inspired countless worshippers throughout the Mediterranean world. Today, Serapis serves as a reminder of the enduring power of religion and the incredible influence that a single individual can have on the course of history and religion itself.
Okay, so that was the video in its entirety.
Hello and welcome to today's
Video was about 2 minutes 53 seconds long, and basically, as you have just saw, or as you have just seen, it deals with the subject of so-called white man Jesus, the origin being Serapis Chritsus. And that's 100% spot on. Okay, and we've been teaching this for a while now, and finally a video surfaces that proves what we've been teaching is correct. Now, I'm going to play the video back again and stop it, interject some points, bring out some scriptures dealing with the information that you hear. All right, so before I play it again, let me just say that Ptolemy is actually mentioned in the scriptures. One example is in the book of Daniel, the 8th chapter, the 8th verse. It says, therefore the he-goat, which the he-goat represents Alexander the Greek. Now you just heard in the video, Alexander the Greek was mentioned. After the death of Alexander the Greek, you had 4 main generals that was underneath Alexander the Greek, and one of those generals was Ptolemy the First. And Ptolemy himself was a skilled, you just heard what the video said, Ptolemy himself was a skilled warrior, so to speak, skilled at war, just like Alexander the Greek was skilled at war. So it says, therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, which means he got sick. If you know the history, Alexander the Greek got sick and perceived that he would die. So he set up his generals to rule after him. And again, you can read that in the Apocrypha, in the book of 1 Maccabees, the 1st chapter. The great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. Now, one of those notable ones was Ptolemy the First. Though that notable, when it speaks about the notable ones, they were known as the generals, the 4 generals underneath Alexander the Greek, who took over after the death of Alexander the Greek. And they took over different parts of the world, at that time. So Ptolemy pretty much took over Egypt, all right? And while he was there, he decided to create this god to unify the people. And a lot of Israelites was living in Egypt. They became known as Hellenistic Jews. They became known as Hellenes. Okay, they started following the customs of the Greeks. Now you can read about that in the book of 1 Maccabees again, the 1st chapter, where many Israelites became like the Greeks. And one of the things that they did, they was worshiping the gods of the Greeks. One of the main gods at that time was Serapis Chritsus, given to them by Ptolemy the First. As a matter of fact, you see the title Ptolemy the First Soter. Soter means savior, because when Ptolemy became pretty much king of Egypt, he also announced himself to be the new pharaoh of Egypt. That's why you'll see paintings and pictures of the pharaohs looking like Edomites. Well, that actually did happen. And a great example of that is when the Ptolemies, because there was a succession of Ptolemies. Ptolemy is a title, right? When the Ptolemies took over Egypt, they announced themselves the new priesthood of Egypt. And they wore all, they wore the garments that the ancient priesthood of Egypt wore, which were Hamites back then. So the Edomites, once they took over Egypt, they announced themselves to be the new priests of Egypt, the new pharaohs, as it were. So that's why they adorned the garb, the headdress and all of that. They became the new pharaohs. Okay, now, again, a lot of people don't notice that the title Cleopatra, which there was a succession of Cleopatras. Cleopatra was actually an Edomite. Okay, she was the first one. She was the daughter of the Ptolemy. I forget which Ptolemy it was, but she was actually his daughter. All right, I'm not sure if it's Ptolemy the second or is it Ptolemy the. As a matter of fact, let's do this. Let's type in what Ptolemy was Cleopatra Cleopatra, the daughter of. Alright? Okay, there you go. Daughter of King Ptolemy the 12th. Ulates. I'm pretty sure it was pronounced Ulates. Cleopatra was destined to become the last queen of the Macedonian dynasty. So Cleopatra was the Edomite. Cleopatra was not an Israelite. Like a lot of jigs think Cleopatra was a so-called black woman. There's pictures of Cleopatra, the real Cleopatra, and she was known for having a big nose. She looked like a so-called Jew. She looked like a small hatter with a big nose. Okay, Cleopatra. So Cleopatra was not a so-called black woman. Cleopatra was the daughter of an Edomite. Okay, she was of the Ptolemy line, the succession of Ptolemies that took over Egypt after the death of Alexander the Greek. See, a lot of our people, they don't really know history, man. Cleopatra was destined to become the last queen of the Macedonian dynasty. The Macedonians were Edomites that ruled Egypt between the death of Alexander the Great, that's right, in 323 BCE, and its annexation by Rome in 30 BCE. Exactly. There you go. So Cleopatra was an Edomite. Okay? So again, Ptolemy Soter. Soter means savior. So when he came into power, he brought the so-called God, right? Serapis Chritsus, and it was, as you just heard in the video, it was based upon Egyptian philosophy. Now you should know that a lot of Israelites, right, back then, especially back then, during the time of, right after the death of Alexander the Greek, during the time of the early 300s BC, the late 200s BC, you had a lot of Israelites that were heavy into Egyptian worship. They were heavy into Greek worship, which was based upon Egyptian worship. Okay, they were trying to go back to Egypt. Okay, as a matter of fact, let's go to the book of Isaiah, right? Isaiah, the 30th chapter. And even to this day, you still have a lot of Israelites heavy into Egyptian worship. Just look at Sarnetta. Well, his very title, Sarnetta. Sarnetta goes back to Egyptian worship, okay? And Egyptian worship, or Greek worship rather, was based upon Egyptian worship. So when the Israelites became Hellenized, really they were worshiping Egyptian worship. You know, the origin of the pharaohs who were Hamites back then, they were worshiping that, but in the form of a Greek fashion, which means an Edomite fashion. That's all Esau did. He took the philosophy of the ancient Hamites, the Egyptian philosophy, and put a Greek face on it. Okay, made it his own, so to speak. And that's what Esau does. All right, Isaiah 30:1, it says, "Woe to the rebellious children, saith the Lord, that take counsel, but not of me, and that cover with a covering, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin." All right? Reading on, it says that walk to go down into Egypt. So when Ptolemy took over, what he did was he unified the Greek fashion that was coming into being during the time of Ptolemy. He unified it with the ancient Egyptian philosophy, and he sold it basically to a lot of Israelites who was enthralled by it. They lapped it up like candy, man. They became Hellenized. Okay? That walk to go down into Egypt and have not asked at my mouth to strengthen themselves listen good, in the strength of Pharaoh. Now again, Ptolemy, let's type this in. Did Ptolemy the first become a pharaoh? Did Ptolemy the first become a pharaoh? There you go. After Alexander's death, his empire quickly fell apart. While wars of succession and power struggles rage across the crumbling empire,